we have with us Barak Ravid. Is a senior Israeli journalist, commentator. He is a diplomatic correspondent for Walla News, a regular contributor to Axios, and a former diplomatic correspondent for Israel Channel 13 News and Haaretz newspaper. He covers Israeli politics and foreign affairs and is specialist on Israel relations with the United States and Europe and the peace process and the Iran issues and many other international affairs. We all follow his scoops all over the time on the Israeli media, and I urge you all to follow him and Tal on their Twitters and other, because there you can see all the news firsthand, faster than any other tool. Tal Schneider is political correspondent for the Times of Israel. Previously, she was a diplomatic and political correspondent for the Globe's business newspaper, the DC correspondent for Ma'ariv Daily, and runs her own political blog, The Plug. She is frequent commentator on Israeli radio and TV stations, a recipient of 2015 Ometz Public Courage and Integrity Award and the 2012 Google Digital Excellence in Journalism Award. So as you can see, top Israeli political and international correspondent, and we have so many developments in the last week in Israel, which we thought it's going to be a good idea to bring you these journalists to talk about the Israel last election and the new government and its policy toward domestic and foreign issues. And I'm sure we are all very interested to hear about this new government and its new policy. In the last 12 years, we have only one prime minister in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. So it's a big change. Some people like it, some people less, but it's very interesting times in Israel. So I will start with some leading questions. I will ask you, Tal, first, and then Barak with the same questions. Of course, you can add and comment, and we'll have a discussion. So Tal, please tell us, what do we need to know about the new government, the main players, and its focus?
Okay. So hi, good morning or afternoon for wherever you are. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Shai. Thank you, David, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. Obviously, the last month have been very, huge changes and historic events unfolding minute by minute in Israel. Just a month ago, or a little bit more than a month, Jewish and Arabs mobs were at each other's throats in Israel's streets, killing, violence, stoning each other, beating each other. It was a horrible scene. I don't think we ever seen anything like that. And then with, few weeks later, we have a new government that sits together, the Islamic Movement Party and the right-wing settler leaders in the same coalition, of course, with centrist parties and also other right-wing and left-wing parties. We are seeing, a slew of dozens of new ministers coming from the Israeli left, liberals, Meretz, and Labor, new ministers coming from right-wing parties, and in a whole, I think, a generational change. Netanyahu is 72 years old. He's been the prime minister for 12 years. Actually, since I came back to Israel from Washington, D.C., I don't think I covered only one prime minister, which was Netanyahu, and haven't, we weren't even able to see something else here for a long time. And now, with this new generation of ministers and a prime minister, we have moved from, as I said, Netanyahu, the 72 years old, the former prime minister, into a 49 years old minister, prime minister, of course, and his, co-prime minister, the alternate prime minister, Yair Lapid, only 54 or so, and nine ministers are women out of 26. This is more than 30% and unprecedented numbers in Israel's ever. Many of them are young, both male and female young ministers. We have two ministers who are coming from Israel minority. One is a Druze minister from Victor Lieberman's party, and the other one is a Muslim minister from Meretz party. So a very diverse, very interesting, fresh, different government. And definitely every minute here has news. The foreign affairs minister and the alternate prime minister, Yair Lapid, very interesting guy, a former anchor, screenwriter, songwriter, someone who was part of Israel elite bohemian life of Tel Aviv and left those life about 10 years ago to move into politics, and together with Naftali Bennett, a former chair of Yesha Council, the settler movements, a former aide, former chief of staff for Netanyahu, and a high-tech successful businessman. These two are representing what we now think is the new Israel. With all that, with all my excitement, it's obviously a very complicated and challenging government. We'll have to see if this government can stick around more than the next budget. It's definitely going to be very, very complicated. They're already tackling huge issues, but we'll, for now, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they are able to get something out of it.
Thank you very much, Tal. Barak, last time that you spoke in one of our events, you have a breaking news in the middle. So I know you are always working. So if you have something, just feel free to share it with us. Your opening remarks about this new government, the main players and its focus.
Thank you, Shai, and I just hope you didn't raise expectations now, and I feel I have to deliver. So I hope I'm not gonna disappoint anybody. Look, this government is very interesting and is very boring at the same time. Meaning, I think that what, at least I'll give you my personal impression in the last week, is, and I think that many of my US colleagues felt the same last January, on January 21st, that all of a sudden, there's this, I don't know how to call it, but it's more quiet, okay? There's less noise. And I think that this is my main takeaway from the first week of this government. It's much more quiet. There's no inner fighting, which is odd because this government is, as Tal said, from the Islamist movement to the settler supporters and everything in the middle. But it seems that everything is much more calm. Again, this is only the first week, so I'm not sure that it will be the same in 2 months or 3 months. But in the previous government we had in the last year, the power-sharing government between Benny Gantz and Netanyahu, the problem started from day one. So at least now it seems that things are much more, how should I put it? There's less, at least for now, there's more substance and less politics. We had our first cabinet meeting yesterday and our first security cabinet meeting yesterday. And there were really close to zero bickering and fighting between the ministers. And the meeting started on time and ended on time. And they actually took decisions. I'll give you a small example that is very relevant to Elnet and its operations in Europe. The government yesterday, and it's a very mundane decision, okay? They approved the appointment of 36 ambassadors and consul generals around the world. This may sound to you as a small thing, but in the crazy political crisis Israel has had in the last 2 years, this decision was waiting for more than 6 months. Netanyahu blocked this decision only because he didn't like personally the diplomat who was appointed to be Israel's ambassador to the EU, Chaim Regev, who's a career diplomat. He had close to zero contact with Netanyahu, but for some reason, Netanyahu decided that he has a problem with him. So he just suspended all the appointments for more than 6 months, and people who were about to go abroad with their kids, you know, the school year starts in September, they didn't know what's going to happen, and the government just, you know, approved this decision, because this is what the government does. It doesn't stop every decision. It takes decision, it votes, you know, so that the country can work. Another decision that the government took yesterday was to establish a board of inquiry about the tragic stampede we had in Mount Meron several weeks ago. You know, 45 people were killed. And the previous government, mainly Netanyahu and his ultra-Orthodox allies, that all the people who were, by the way, all the people who died in this tragedy were ultra-Orthodox, but they refused to establish this board of inquiry because they knew that, you know, they were at least partially responsible for this tragedy. And the families of those people who were killed, many of those families fought in order for this board of inquiry to be established. And it was established yesterday in the first meeting of the government. So all of this, again, it's funny that I'm taking, you know, quite, you know, ordinary mechanisms in a government and portray them as if they were special. But they are special because for 2 years we were in a deep political crisis with the government in total dysfunction. And the fact that now things are going back to normal are in our times, that the fact that the government, you know, actually convenes, talks about issues, votes on issues, this very mundane operation is now something very big in Israel. And the fact that it's happening is something that we haven't seen for a long time. The big question mark, how long this honeymoon can continue and how long those different parties will be able to sit together and try to find solutions for the disagreements instead of, you know, taking the government apart.
So, Barak, as you said, and maybe the most important, interesting these days that everybody asks themselves, and I just got it from our chairman, Larry Hochberg too, is, then I will ask you, Tal, the same question, is what do you think, how stable is this current government, and what are the biggest challenges ahead for its survival? I think that's the main reason, main question that everybody asks.
Well, I think it's very fragile. It's very, very fragile, and a lot of the energy of the government will be about self-preservation. This is why it will be very limited in the steps that it can take. On the other hand, that's exactly the challenge, to find the issues that most Israelis agree on, and there are quite a lot of those issues, and to find solutions to them. Obviously, in Israel, many, many times, almost every government has to deal with things that it didn't think it would have to. You know, nobody could have expected, you know, a pandemic, or you know, usually, unfortunately, every few months we have a war in Gaza, and there are also other things that happen along the way that it's hard to predict. And I think that those will be exactly the big risks for this government, the things that you cannot predict and that usually cause political disagreements. And again, the main question will be whether this government the heads of the parties can sit together and agree when differences arise. It wasn't tested yet. So I think, you know, the jury is still out on how long this government can last.
So before we go to foreign policy, Tal, can you give us your thoughts about the survival chances of this government?
Yeah, I agree. It's very fragile, but you have to take into account some, technical aspects. It's kind of hard to topple a government. You need 61 seats or 61 votes for that. Now Netanyahu sits in the opposition as the opposition leader, but not the all opposition is with him. I mean, he has 59, but out of that 59, at least 6 members are from the Joint Arab List, so they probably will not vote for him with him, and will not support him in a crusade to topple the government. So he has 53. It's difficult maneuvering for him. Some of his, it's the Likud party. They were ministers for 12 years. They're not used to being in the opposition. Some of them wanted to go out of the country for a vacation or so. So right now, as we speak, they're in the Knesset. They're unable to get enough votes to maneuver things against the government. So that having said that, this government may crumble from the inside, because their problem is to get a policy together, and to get, they will have a problem to get things done. So now they are already fighting about some, agenda issues, and will have a hard time, setting straight policy. With that, I think that if they'll pass the budget, and that has to be done within, 120 days, so, around, September or so, if they will pass the budget, they have a survival chances until, March of 2023. So about 18, 19, 20 months from now, it's what I think at the moment. But, Israel really is a roller coaster. We'll have to see, what's going on. I mean, as said here, COVID or other world affairs, or, terror, Iran, any kind of subject that you may come up with, how volatile things are here.
Yeah, so by the Israeli system, as Tal and Barak just explained, the only way to take down governments after it's sworn in is by 61 out of 120 members of the Knesset voting against the government, but not just that, but also voting at the same time or signing for an alternative prime minister. And because there is no chance that 61 votes like that will be found, I don't think it's even a possibility at all. Once a government has been sworn in, it's very hard to take it down. The only chance to take it down is by they are not passing the budget, and they have a few months to pass it now. And if they pass it for a year and a quarter or so, till the next budget, they are kind of safe, unless they decided to commit suicide in a political way and to dissolve themselves because of some unbridged disagreements, as Barak mentioned. So let's move, because ELNET is an organization who devoted to strengthen the relationship between Israel and Europe, and we are dealing a lot with the Arab moderate world, with Europe, of course, and the United States, and Jewish community in the United States, but mainly with the policy of Europe toward Israel and vice versa. So Tal, can you tell us what foreign policy can we expect from the new government, what they likely going to do in regards to main policy issues like Iran, Hezbollah, Israel-Arab normalization, which are the subjects that also ELNET is dealing with, and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, of course, how this government will navigate its way on these complicated international issues.
So first, let me give the credit to my colleague Barak, who broke the news yesterday that the first foreign trip for the Foreign Affairs Minister Yair Lapid will be to the United Arab Emirates, and that will take already next week. So you see the Foreign Affairs Minister choosing to go to the Emirates first. That's probably on his top of the agenda. Also a way to show to the Arab, moderate world where does he wants to have his priority arranged. I would say that one of the platform on which Yair Lapid ran during the 4 election cycles was to have a better relationship with the Western democracies, meaning with the United States, meaning obviously with the Democratic Party, and also with Europe. Through the years, Lapid was a harsh critic of Netanyahu for ruining some of the relationship. Again, in the United States, Netanyahu had a good relationship with the Republican Party, but he caused a huge damage to Israel as per the relationship with the Democratic Party. Now, it never used to be either that or that. Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister needed to have a good relationship with both. But Netanyahu actually went all the way against the Democratic Party and for the Republican Party. And actually he is now, as an opposition leader, he is still doing it. We had 2 speeches from him in the last week made in Hebrew, in which he actually went 100% against the Biden administrations. And I think both Lapid and Naftali Bennett, the Prime Minister, will try to put themselves in a position where we are not playing this foreign affair game when you blame other country for your for things that you need to take care of. So on Iran front, we will see a diverse and very aggressive argument inside Israel, but the Prime Minister, the Foreign Affairs Minister, would definitely take the step to calm down things with the current administrations, and I suppose also with Europe. It doesn't mean that Israel will agree to the JCPOA, JCPOA 2.0. It doesn't mean it will agree to that, but it will try to maneuver, better behind the scene to get Israel influential on the terms of that agreement. I think it's worth mentioning that Yair Lapid had a previous really good relationship with Macron. I would even say that Macron took the step of meeting Yair Lapid in Paris in one of those election cycles. Maybe it was the first one out of the 4 election cycles, which was quite rare. I mean, we saw Donald Trump taking Netanyahu's side at all times during those campaigns, but we did not see European leaders take sides. But Macron, the president of France, actually took side and took a photo with Lapid. So Lapid is back then he was opposition leader, showing off his relationship with France. I think he will try to double down on that, probably get things rolling with Germany, UK and France, but we'll have to see what are the specifics, because on the JCPOA 2.0, they are not on the same side. We also will have to look into the new relationship between the Prime Minister and the Foreign Affairs Minister. We gotten used to, through those 12 years of Netanyahu's governance, we got used to the fact that Netanyahu did not allow to any of his ministers to get any credit whatsoever. We didn't, actually we got to the point where he did not allow a foreign affairs minister to travel to the Emirates because he wanted to be the first one to go. And now on this new government, you see again Yair Lapid choosing his first foreign affairs trips to this country, and Bennett congratulating him on Twitter. So these 2 guys are trying to show to the world and to the Israeli citizens what a bromance or brotherhood they have with each other. And I mean, yesterday at the cabinet, at the first government meeting, I saw how Lapid is taking a step aside and letting Bennett, the Prime Minister, have the entire time and fame on him. So for now, we don't see any wedge between them, but we'll have to see what's going on next. But definitely a different new game here.
Thank you, Tal. Barak, words about the policy of the new government on the Arab world and the United States and toward Europe.
I want to focus on Europe because that's your main, that's Elnet's main mission. And I think that for Elnet, this is a big opportunity, but also a challenge, because this new government is going to, I think, at least, is going to review Israel's relationship with many countries in Europe. Netanyahu, for the last 12 years, was basically, like Trump, was working against the European Union and against Brussels, trying to drive a wedge between the member states of the European Union, supporting Brexit, making friends with the likes of Orban and the Kaczynski clan in Poland, and I think that this is over. This policy is over, and I think this is a major shift when it comes to Europe. When Lapid spoke to several European ministers since he assumed office, this was one of his main messages, that Israel is coming back to Europe, coming back to the group of liberal democracies in Europe, and reviewing its ties with the non-liberal European government. And I think that this is a major shift, and we will see it very soon. For example, as far as I understand, the Hungarian Minister of Foreign Affairs sent Lapid a note. I don't think he got a note back. And I'm not sure he will. So I think this is a major shift and a major challenge and an opportunity for ELNET to also maybe review the way it is handling relations, it's handling its operations in Europe. I think, as Tal said, France will be, I think, a major focus for Lapid, also Germany, also the Netherlands, outside the European Union, obviously the UK. But I think that, again, the main change in Israel's foreign policy in Europe will be a cooling down of relations with Central European governments. I think we will see it, Hungary and Poland, that's very clear. But I think countries like Slovakia, Czech Republic, also countries that are outside of the EU, but on the margins, like for example Serbia, for example Belarus. I think we will see this kind of change. I think the government will stop flirting with radical right-wing elements in European countries, with the AfD in Germany, with Front National in France, with the radical right-wing racists in Sweden, with people like Geert Wilders. I think that those people who were welcomed here in the last 12 years, I'm not sure will continue to be welcomed in this country as long as this government is in power, unless they will change their behavior. And I think that governments in Europe or parties in Europe that will flirt with xenophobia, Islamophobia, homophobia, and anti-Semitism will have very bad relations with Israel. And I think this is a major shift. Unfortunately, this was not the case in the previous government that allowed Poland to continue to rewrite history regarding the Holocaust, that allowed Orban to flirt with anti-Semites and anti-Semitism, and with other parties, radical right-wing parties in Europe. This will stop.
Shai, if I just
yes,
may ask you,
please, Tal. Sure.
let's not forget that Yair Lapid is the son of Holocaust survivor, the former Justice Minister Tommy Lapid, who was born in Hungary and came to Israel after surviving the Holocaust. And I think the situation in Hungary is so much in Lapid's ethos and personal story, and so it's really important to put that also. I mean, you may have all read Bennett, the prime minister, is a son of immigrants from San Francisco, actually progressive parents. I mean, they used to be progressive, not anymore. They went to be more religious when he was a child. And Lapid carries the European, ethos of World War II. So it's important to take that into, when you're thinking about his agenda and so.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both. Just wants to mention that Elnet is positioned now in London too, which is the right place to be, as you said, Barak, in Paris and Berlin and Warsaw, and of course Brussels. So we are all over Europe. And something interesting that we saw in the last confrontation in Gaza, it's while anti-Semitism and demonstration against Israel were raised all around the world, we count something like 19 or 20 European countries who support Israel very much, all the way to put the Israeli flags on their government houses, foreign ministers who came to visit Israel, ambassadors who expressed a very strong support to Israel. Oh, it was interesting to see the support of at least the administrations and the governments of Europe toward Israel, and it's definitely going to be a challenge every time that we have this kind of event in Gaza. It's a big challenge for every government, and this government, together with the Arab parties in it, I guess, going to face great challenges, even more than the usual. So if you can move on with this, Tal, and talk a bit about the relations of the new government with the Biden administration now in the United States, and maybe to mention the Jewish community in the United States, which you were, I guess, part of it for many years, as well as many of our friends and supporters here in this call. And how do you think it will change with the new government?
Okay, so actually it was kind of breathtaking. A week and a day ago, the new government was sworn in the Israeli parliament, in the Knesset. Not an hour passed, and the new prime minister, Naftali Bennett, got a phone call from the White House with President Biden on the line, congratulating him. Now, why was this breathtaking? Because we just remember how on January, Biden was inaugurated, and it took him more than a month to call, the former prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and just, make this, little just, first call. And we were, the Israeli press was all over it. How come Biden is talking to so many world leaders, and he's not even picking the phone and calling our prime minister. So I think the Biden administration wants a very good relationship with the new government. Since, as I said earlier, in these last 7 days, we heard the former prime minister saying out loud how he should keep his fight with the US administration, with the current administration, should keep the fight with respect to the Iran out in the open, instead of, handling it as in a more diplomatic way. These kind of statements are worrisome, and I think the president and all of his staffers will probably like better to see this government stays around. And in order to make sure this is the case, they will probably be very careful and gentle, like you approach a new baby. You don't move it around too much. You don't expose it to the sun. So again, I mean, I'm just comparing it to a very new, fresh born baby, almost unable to walk, unable to eat by itself at the moment, and very fragile. So very delicate. They will have to be very delicate. And everybody knows it's a delicate government because of its Arab component. It's the Islamic movement of Israel, an Arab, very complicated component, and the right and left and center component. So we have already seen all of the first calls. We have seen the Secretary of State calling, I think, already twice to the Foreign Affairs Minister. We have Israel's outgoing president, Rivlin, who will travel to Washington next week, and he will be the first Israel top official to be in DC after the Biden administration took place. So I think the fact that we have a new administration in DC and a new administration in Jerusalem makes it a little bit easier for everybody to get around to make those agenda and new connections decision. But in Israel, terror organizations and threats from the borders do not wait for this friendly gathering to get itself together. So I am pretty sure we will have these challenges, but we will have to see. It's not surprising to see the Biden administration embracing very hard, very widely this new government. As I said earlier, Lapid kept in good connections with the Democratic Party, and he will now have to make the effort to make a connection in the Republican Party as well, because his agenda was to be bipartisan. So he is no longer the opposition leader. He will have himself to make good connection. As for the Jewish community, there is a new minister of diaspora. Naftali Bennett was the minister of diaspora for, I think, 3 or 4 years. And now the Labor, the liberal left party, the Social Democratic Party, has this diaspora portfolio, and they already had it included in the coalition agreements that they will change the approach towards the reform and conservative Jewish communities of the United States.
Thank you, Tal. Barak.
Reform and conservative everywhere, not just Americans.
Of course. Barak, so if you can, if you have something to add to the Israel-United States relations, and then maybe if you can comment about the subjects that you are an expert on, the Iran issue and the challenges for the new government with Iran.
I think both are connected. I think the main issue in Israel's relations with the United States right now, and the main challenge for the new Israeli government, is how to navigate the fact that the Biden administration is still negotiating indirectly with Iran on the return to the 2015 nuclear deal. It seems that at least a lot of people think that this deal is a matter of weeks. Some will say a matter of months, but I haven't heard a lot of people who think that there's not going to be a deal. I personally think that the Iranians might, unlike what most of us think, maybe the Iranians don't even want a deal. Maybe they're just, playing for time. But in any case, this will be number one issue in every dialogue between Israel and the Biden administration going forward. I think that Rivlin's visit to the White House, which was supposed to be ceremonial to honor Rivlin for the end of his term, becomes much more important, because this will be Biden's opportunity to hear from Rivlin, who is really one of the most seasoned politicians in the country, maybe the most seasoned one, except for Netanyahu, to sit with him and actually, hear from him directly about Bennett, about who Rivlin knows for quite a lot of years, about Lapid, who Rivlin also knows for many years, and maybe get some advice from Rivlin on how to work with this government and manage the disagreements in a way that will not destabilize it. I think that this is the main thing that the Biden administration wants to do right now. It doesn't want to destabilize the government. It wants to give it time. It's willing to hold on many things it wanted to do in order to allow this government to stabilize, because if there's one thing that the Biden administration doesn't want is another elections in Israel and more political turmoil. And I think that they will make every effort possible to keep differences in a very low profile and to keep them private and not public, and to try and reach a situation when there's no daylight between the Biden administration and the Israeli government. It sounds very hard to do, but actually it's right now, at least, it's in both sides' interests.
Thank you very much, Barak. I want to remind our audience that the floor is open for questions from the audience, so you can publish them on the chat box and our staff will take it from there. I will ask Mindy Stein now. I saw that you have questions about local domestic politics and the Arab parties. Mindy, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Yes, thank you for the presentations. I just wanted you to talk about the Kamenetz law that they're freezing to stop any illegal settlements, especially in Area C, and also why they're not worried what Abbas from the Rum Party has said in Arabic, that he vowed to reclaim all the land for the Arab Israelis, and they put him in charge of the Negev and the unrecognized villages, the Bedouin villages.
Thank you.
How's that going to work?
Thank you, Mindy. Tal, maybe you can ask, Mindy asked about the Kamenetz law and in general, the complication with the Ram Arabic Party as part of this coalition, I guess.
Okay. So the Kamenetz law actually applies within the borders of the state of Israel. It does not apply to any settlements or a village or a city outside the borders of the state of Israel. So when you say settlements, you probably mean settlements in Judea and Samaria. So the Kamenetz law has nothing to do with those areas. Those areas are under the control of a military commander, under the under the IDF actually governing bodies. Kamenetz law is relevant to Arab and Jewish villages and cities all over the country, but again in the sovereignty of the state of Israel. And as we have 21% of the society, which is Palestinian, you have Israeli Palestinians. This law was actually enacted in order to enhance government ability to control illegal buildings, illegal housing, and so on. And it was meant to apply mostly to Arab citizens. It was done during the time of the Netanyahu government. It was actually a very discriminative bill that was enacted on spite, on purpose, in order to affect the Arab community's abilities to evolve and have more houses and so on. And it gained huge criticism. One thing that happened also is that when you are enacting a bill, you don't write in the bill that it is slated against Muslims only, right? It's for the entire population. So the result that the Netanyahu government did not mean for it to be the result, but the result was also it hurt lots of agricultural buildings around Israel. And some of the agricultural voters came up to Netanyahu on the second round of election and begged him to get rid of this bill. And he promised them just that. Him and Ayelet Shaked and the entire right-wing politicians said, okay, now after a couple of years, we do understand that the Kamenetz law is being applied to Jewish and Arab in the same way. Obviously, it's a bill. And we understand we need to get rid of it. And this was their campaign promise before any of them thought that they will sit together with the Islamic movement. So when we are worried about the Communist bill, we have to take into consideration that already Netanyahu and already Yamina, Ayelet Shaked, they all promised to change that law. And I would say the fact that we have an Islamic movement party, RAM, inside this coalition means that they will have to confront the bad housing situation we have in the Arab society. The Arabs of Israel, the Palestinians of Israel, they need better housing, they need better way of living, they need better infrastructure. They have been lagged and they have been left behind for so many years. If there is one optimism in this, I mean, I don't know how many of you are aware of that, but Israel has never built an Arab new city or new village since the day the country was born 73 years ago. So there's so many things to do on the Arab housing, and the Communist law should probably be, I mean, it's already been frozen. It should be, kept frozen or in any other way, put aside or so, changed or whatever.
Okay, thank you, Tal. Maya Tzion, I see, have here questions to Barak. Maya, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Well, good evening. So what I wanted to know, I'm sorry, my camera doesn't work, but to what extent do you think Israel can advance its relation with the European Union so it would actually the linkage policy that the EU decided upon in 2009 and can perhaps advance its relation to a deep and comprehensive free trade area or to a new agreement, a new political framework?
I think
Thank
that
you. Just to say, Dr. Maya Tzion is from the Hebrew University. Okay, yes, Barak.
Yeah, thanks, Maya. I think that the linkage policy you mentioned from 2009, we had in the last year a very significant opportunity to change this policy. After the Israeli government decided to take off the table the annexation plan and instead go for a policy of normalization with the Arab world, there was a chance to change relations with the EU, with the institutions, to hold an association council for the first time in many, many years. Unfortunately, it didn't work. There are those who say that it didn't work because the EU High Representative for Foreign Policy, Joseph Borrell, was scared from Ireland and Malta and Sweden. This is what you'll hear from the Israeli Foreign Ministry, and didn't want to go ahead with the Association Council, regardless of the fact that countries like Germany, for example, or Austria wanted him to do so. And there's another version that says that the Israeli government didn't change its policy towards the EU and continued to try and divide the EU and weaken Brussels, and therefore lost the opportunity to change this policy. I'll just give you two examples. Borrell wanted to come to Israel several times in the last year, and every time he was rejected. The Israeli government did not agree to allow Borrell to visit Israel. 2 weeks ago, the European the new EU envoy for the peace process, Mr. Koopmans, was in Israel, and the Israeli government, the Israeli Foreign Ministry, boycotted him, refused to meet him. When this is the policy, unfortunately, I do not see a way to warm relations with the EU and to move ahead with delinking, doing this delinking process and getting an association council. I hope that Yair Lapid will change that. Lapid's second phone call with another foreign minister. His first phone call was with Blinken. His second phone call was with Borrell. So I hope that this is, I know that this is a priority for Lapid. Lapid is the most pro-European foreign minister we've had since maybe Shimon Peres. And I hope that Lapid will change that, and that obviously, if he will, I hope that Brussels will answer this shift with a shift of its own and allow an association council to take place.
Thank you, Barak. Thank you, Dr. Sion, for being with us. Here, definitely, Barak, Elnet, especially our office in Brussels, work a lot on the association matter to advance it, and we hope that it's going to happen soon. I will let now to our president, David Segal, to ask a question.
Thank you, Shai, and thank both of you, Barak and Tal. I remember you both when we were all much younger, and we were all in Washington circles doing press and policy. So it's great to be back with you. I wanted to ask, especially Barak, your the insights into the future of Israel and Europe, and ask you about the Abraham Accords and normalization in the Middle East. What do you see as the prospects of Israel being able to encourage more European participation in expanding that very important process in the region?
I think that Europe, the EU and member states, I think, missed this opportunity for a very long time. I think they could have been much more involved in Israel-Arab normalization. The only European country that actually took active step in this direction is Germany, when it convened the meeting between Gabi Ashkenazi and the Emirati foreign minister in Berlin I think a few months ago, more than 6 months ago. Unfortunately, almost no European country got involved before the Abraham Accords and after the Abraham Accords. I think it's a missed opportunity. I think there's a lot to do. Just for example, in a country like Sudan, that is very important for many European countries. I think a lot can be done with Israel in Sudan, and to promote this normalization process with Sudan that is actually only in its very early stages. I think Sudan can be a very good place to do it. And also with other countries that still did not join the Abraham Accords, when I'm sure that European countries also have interests there, either in North Africa or in the Gulf. And I think that also, or the Horn of Africa. And I think that there's still a lot of things that can be done. Unfortunately, I don't see any appetite from any European country to really take an active step and do anything about it.
Thank you very much, Barak. Before we are coming to conclusion, Tal, any conclusion remarks in regards to domestic or foreign policy of the new government?
Well, it's worth watching for the connection inside the coalition. With all due respect to the Prime Minister Bennett and the Foreign Affairs Minister Lapid, they are very much dependent on their partners, on the Defense Minister Benny Gantz, who wants to have his space and his spot in the gang, on the Transportation Minister Merav Michaeli, who is the only woman in the top of those parties, but she became a very influential politician because she managed to do, some political, tricks that were not done here with respect to the Labour Party for many years. So she can be stubborn as hell, and it's worth looking at what she's doing. And obviously, I think the new kid on the block, Mansour Abbas, the Ram leader, the Islamic party leader, who is the youngest of all, by the way. He's just, I think he is around 39 or 40. Well, he's younger than the rest of them. And he is quite a politician, knows perfectly well how to handle Israeli media and how to play with Israeli media. So it's also very interesting to watch him. He seems to be a very well-intended politician that wants to bring change for the Arab communities in Israel, but also one that knows how to play his cards all the way and to the end. So I think, you know, I don't agree with what Barak said at the beginning of our conversation. I don't think it's going to be very boring. I think it's going to be very, you know, interesting.
Thank you. I want to mention also that we have a new president in Israel, which also probably will influence, very much involved with the diaspora and the Jewish affairs, Bougie Herzog, which we are very fortunate to have his brother, Mike Herzog, Brigadier General Mike Herzog, working with us in Elnet. So it's the new government, new president, new policy, domestic and foreign policy. A very interesting future ahead of us. Barak, any remarks to conclude?
I think that a lot of the things that we got used to in the last 12 years are going to change. It's a different country. I know it sounds like a big statement, but it is a different country because everything about Israel in the last 12 years was about Bibi. And it's not the case anymore. Because right now, when something happens, and we will not analyze it only according to, is it good for Bibi or bad for Bibi? Is Bibi to blame or Bibi deserves credit? Is Bibi in favor or Bibi against? No, that's it. Now we'll have to deal with our problems in, let's say, within a more serious and mature discourse. And I hope it will only make us better.
Well, as the first Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, once said, in Israel, in order to be a realist, you have to believe in miracles. So we all hope for miracles and a better future. Thank you very much, Barak Ravid and Tal Schneider, for your very well deserved insights and wisdom